If you can hear me, ladies and gentlemen. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hello? 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 Hello?
Hello? Hello, hello, hello. All right. Thank you very much for your patience. I'm going to run through this class this evening. So we are going to be a bit brief. As many of you know, we are just coming out of our annual Believers Equip conference, and it's been quite a demanding season. The whole of last week was really, really demanding, and we've now had all kinds of challenges trying to start this broadcast this evening. So I'm going to run through the bare bones of what we are supposed to be considering this evening. This evening, our class in faith and politics is faith and political ideology. Faith and political ideology, and we intend to have been looking at a case study of the political scenario in terms of ideology and faith as it plays out in the United States of America. But I'm going to be more broad in my approach just because we do not have a lot of time. So, what I'll try to do is to give you a little bit of a handle and a justification for why people start to talk about faith and political ideology in one breath. Now, the first thing to notice is that the idea of faith and political ideology for us essentially means Christianity and political ideology. I speak more from the standpoint of a Christian. And in considering Christianity and political ideology, or faith in general and political ideology, you notice that the class we did on worldview will immediately become very relevant because your ideology is, in layman's term, there are all kinds of arguments in terms of the distinction between ideology and ideologies in the social sciences. But I want to take a simplistic approach to facilitate understanding here that when talking about ideology or ideologies, it is very much like talking about worldviews. It is the lens through which you process life, it is the lens through which you interpret life, it is a lens through which you understand life. Now, you process life, you interpret life, you understand life through these lenses. But when we are talking about political ideology, there are very specific ideologies that have emerged over the course of human history and over the course of human civilization. There isn't enough space for us to want to go into all of the ideologies that have ever been suggested or that are even popular for that matter, or that have been historically popular. But when we said we were going to be looking at a case study of the United States of America, you know very well that in the United States of America, there are two dominant political parties, and those two dominant political parties are organized along political ideologies. So you would have liberalism on the one hand, and then you will have conservatism on the other hand. Now, the conservatives and the liberals, they have certain levels of overlap, but generally they are seen as like two sides of the same coin. Because when it comes to the way that life is interpreted across these lenses, it is obvious that the political ideology of the conservatives and the political ideology of the liberals are quite opposite. And I'm going to dive straight into it. If political ideology is the political paradigm or is the ideological paradigm through which you interpret political moves, what it tells us immediately is that the way that you conceive of the way that you conceive of the world and the place of government in the world is going to determine where you pitch your tent in terms of your political ideology. Let me put it in a different way. Your faith, if you're a person of faith, and of course we are looking at faith and political ideology, in trying to look at politics, politics cannot be seen completely devoid of the ideologies that have presented themselves around which political interests have evolved. But as a Christian, you cannot throw away the things that are your dearly held beliefs when you go into the political space. We already talked about that some weeks ago when we said that while it is a very sensible thing to talk about the separation of state and the church, it doesn't make sense to talk about the separation of the state and religion, because people's religion gives them a lens through which they look at the world. People's worldviews are forged in part by their religious commitment, so that from the very start, if you are saying people should separate religion from politics or politics from religion, you are asking for something that cannot be done, just simply because people's religion is already part of the lens through which they look at all of reality. And that worldview in the political space is very much like what a political ideology is. So, what are the particular beliefs of this thinking bloc in the way that they understand the place of government and the role of government in the lives of the citizenry? That's basically what political ideology is. And when you look historically, you would realize that we've had all kinds of political ideologies. There's been, in terms of naming them, you can talk of conservatives, liberals, socialists, fascists. You can talk about even certain religions are properly expressed as political ideologies. So, like Islam, for instance, Islam is more appropriately a political movement, much more than it is almost anything else. I know, I mean, I stand to be corrected, but that's my studied opinion. So you see that even in a country like Nigeria, we have a legal system that is drawn along the Islamic jurisprudence and Islamic law. So you have a Sharia system that is operational in certain states of the federation, and they have an established hierarchy of judges and courts, and several of them are maintained by the coffers or maintained from the coffers of government. They are in the employment of the government. So you talk about the Grand Qadis. These are establishments of religion, but in this case it is the Islamic faith. So that Islam is, for all intents and purposes, a political ideology. So there are all kinds of political ideologies. You have communism, and so on and so forth. But looking at the United States of America, which is our main focus, you would have liberalism and you will have conservatism. And the two of them are quite well developed in the United States of America. In liberalism, there is a whole lot that goes with it. Liberalism is becoming very associated with, sometimes, or rightly or wrongly so, with socialism, with welfareism as principles of government or principles of the running of society. And I want to break those down very quickly for us. Now, so this whole idea of liberalism. So, what are the liberals? What are the ideological beliefs of the liberal political system or political ideology? What would it be? And I think to answer that question very briefly is to give you a little bit of a description of the things that are believed by those that are said to be liberals. So the liberals are those that believe in the personal autonomy of the individual person, personal autonomy that is largely devoid of interference from any supreme being. In plain English, it's just a system that is secular in its understanding and its orientation. And the secular is or secularism, for instance, is, as someone defines it, if I may paraphrase, is a system by which religious institutions and religious symbols have lost their social significance. Okay? So, where religious institutions, religious symbols have lost their social significance, that is secularism. It is the posture that anything that has to do with the supernatural, anything that has to do with the idea of a God, is not tenable in how we understand and how we formulate our understanding of our society and in how we live our lives. The moment that you take to a secularist view, which is almost inevitable within the liberal political framework, it would mean that considerations like what is God's position on such a matter as this can no longer be tenable as part of the ways that you arrive at your decisions. So, if something is right or wrong, we have to do that wholly without recourse to recognizing any other worldly categories like God's existence. Now, the liberals also believe in what has now been called welfareism, where it is as if the government is absolutely responsible for making sure that everybody is doing very well in society. And in the United States of America, you would notice that the liberals would advocate for some kind of tax regime that appears to take a lot from those that have a lot so that it can be given in quote, given in quote now, so that it can be given to those that do not have as much, so that there can be a bridging of that gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's not as simple as I'm putting it, but I'm just trying to simplify because of the sake of our time. And because personal autonomy is at the core of the liberal ideology, you notice if people can come together and say, this is who I am, this is what I want for myself, and it does not hurt anybody, or at least if they can make the case that it doesn't hurt anybody, and they can make the case that they are in full possession of their faculty in taking that decision, then it looks like there shouldn't be any hurdle on their way to realizing that personal ideal, so long as, we cannot really say a hurt society and it does not hurt them, and we can say that they are in full possession of their faculties in taking that decision. So this is where you see that immediately things like the LGBTQ plus and whatever else is in front of LGBTQ becomes a major issue. you would notice also that the conservative seems to be on the very opposite end of that spectrum. So the conservatives believe that they advance the position that is almost identical with capitalism, which is a system where hard work is the bedrock for what you can become, and that there should be commensurate reward for hard work. Now, the view would be to say, if I make a lot of money and you take from the lot of money I make and you give to people that don't make a lot of money, remember I'm simplifying, but that's the basic idea. Then what will be the motivation for me to keep working? All right, when I know that the more money I make, there is a system in government that sees to it that a lot of the money I make goes to people that don't make as much money. And if that is also the case, on the other hand, what is there to keep those that do not have from being lazy if they know that they are going to be getting something from those that do have? And it is a simplified version of what that posture is, but that's just to give you a general idea. So while the liberals on the one hand would say, let's give, let's take from those that have because they have had, because maybe they have exploited society, and let's give to those that don't have. The conservatives are saying, yes, we need to help people, but that help should be helping them to be able to take responsibility so that they can be functional contributors to the economy and to civilization. And so you see that first layer of difference. The next layer of difference was what I already talked about when I talked about personal autonomy. So conservatives generally would believe that there is a cultural component. There is a tradition. Tradition, for instance, is a very big one with conservatives. Culture is a very big one with conservatives. And then just being conservative means that you are not overly loud, in all shapes, and in all forms. But in this case, we are not talking about vocally loud. We are talking about, ideologically, and we are talking about that sense of what is proper in society, particularly in the public space. So the conservatives generally are the people that uphold ideologies that have traditionally now been attractive to Christians, because a lot of conservative ideologies seem to be in sync with Christian beliefs and ideals. Conservatism and Christianity are not the same things, but conservative political ideology has a lot that appeal to Christians than liberal ideologies do have what might be the thing that appeal to Christians on a very important matter, the status of life and the idea of human self-determinism, if you like. Now, when I talk about the idea of life, I'm looking at, in the US, the big question is pro-life, pro-choice. The pro-life, pro-choice argument is to say, I'm a person, as a pro-choice person, I have choice to determine what I want to do with my body. And it's usually in the context of abortion. So somebody is pregnant, can I have abortion on demand? Well, if you are pro-choice, you will say yes. You will say yes, I can have abortion on demand. If you are pro-life, you would say, well, that thing in the womb of the lady is a person. And if it is wrong to kill a person outside of the womb, the location of the person should not be what determines whether the person can be killed at will or not, because this person has a very independent personality and a very independent destiny, if you like. The mere fact that the person happened to exist within the body of another person does not mean that the person is any less a person. All right. Now, so political ideology, in that sense, you quickly start to see why it has something to do with faith. So, when we talk about faith and political ideology, using the United States of America as a case study, this is why it looks like a lot of evangelicals happen to be on one side of the political divide much more than on the other side of the political divide. And things get so heated that some people would say, well, you can be a Christian and you can be on either side of the divide because, for instance, the liberals, they support welfare to the poor, taking care of the giving support to those that are not well to do, maybe things like making education free, making healthcare free. They talk a lot of the free stuff that they believe government is supposed to make available for people. But the reality is, on the other hand, the conservatives will now be asking how. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Where are you going to get the money from? And the conservatives will just basically say to you that reward, profit is the incentive for hard work. If people are not sure that what they make by reason of their honest hard work is going to be profit for them, such that they can be sure that if I put in more, all things being equal, I will make more, then you start to kill the motivation for that level of industry that has been the backbone of much of modern civilization, at least in the United States of America. And then the other argument that the conservatives would make would be the argument that says we are not against helping people and all of that, but we believe it is not government's position to take away from us or to take away from people just to give to other people. That is why charities exist, and that this should be a discretionary act on the side of people. And it is for those kinds of purposes that things like the Red Cross Society, the church, and the other non-governmental organizations or charities, as they are called in some parts of the world, that's why they exist. And so when people make all that money, they should be free in wanting to help society to decide to partner with non-governmental organizations that are invested in bringing relief to different people that are suffering in different situations in society, so that people can clearly choose how they want their generosity to be expressed, but that you shouldn't be forcing generosity on people because they're just something quite dehumanizing or discouraging at the very least about that kind of idea. So you see that there are very, very, very different ways of looking at life. So the conservatives would say, for instance, that we believe in the right of the baby in the womb to live as an independent entity wholly apart from the mother. And then the liberals would say we believe in the choice of a woman to determine whether she wants to keep a pregnancy or not. And so it starts to boil down to arguments like where does life begin? How do you define personhood? And what is the value of life? Is life sacred? If life is sacred, at what point can we say what is growing in the womb of a woman is a life? And these arguments have been going on for decades, particularly in the Western world. And how you answer that question is one thing, but there are bigger issues. So, for instance, if somebody says, "I believe that life is sacred and life should not be taken just at the pleasure of somebody else," they can be liberals and still support abortion on demand or still be pro-choice, because the next question will be, so when does life begin? What constitutes a living person? And then they can say, well, some people would say late term abortion is wrong. Late term, maybe from 7 months to 9 months, the last trimester. They would say at that point, from the evidences of science and the pictures we have seen, we can tell that at that point a life has now emerged, and we wouldn't support that. Some other persons, there are people now that have advocated on the basis of certain reasoning that they would call, intellectual, that age up until the moment of birth. Some people are even proposing something that I can't remember how it's called, but it's almost like it's almost like post-birth abortion. It's almost something like that, which is to say that even after a baby is come out of the womb, their definition of personhood is so loose that a baby that has now been born does not still qualify in their own definition of personhood, such that that baby is still not the sort of person that can be protected by resort to talking about the right to life. So both of you may agree in principle that life should not be taken indiscriminately at the discretion of a person, another person, yet you will answer the question, should a woman be able to commit abortion on demand? You will answer that question very, very differently because of the next question, which is, so at what point exactly does a human person begin? At what stage can you say this is now a person that is now endowed with all of the rights that are incidental to personhood, which now includes the right to life? That at that point, if you were to kill that person or to destroy that thing, you would have destroyed the life. How you answer that question can now be radically different. And generally, the conservatives will answer that question conservatively to say that life begins from the very moment of conception. That would be the general idea. And then other people would say on the liberal side, no, life doesn't begin there. Then the second thing would be to say the right of a woman to over her body it supersedes the right of anything that is growing up in the womb of a woman. Now, I'm a person of faith. I'm a believer. And so, logically speaking, I find it very difficult to see how one might even play the devil's advocate if you wanted to defend the liberal position on this matter of abortion. As a Christian, in all honesty, I find it very difficult to even be able to play the devil's advocate, because when I look at the argument, it's too far. It's too far off from what I think anybody that wants to be logically consistent would want to advance. And I'll tell you why. Now, so when you say that a woman has a right over her body, a woman has a right over her body, yes, that is true. The next thing would be to say, so what constitutes the body of a woman? Does a child growing up in the womb of another person, does that child include the body of the woman, such that when the woman takes away that child, it will almost look like maybe just having an amputation or cutting your fingernail? I can't bring myself to think that that is analogous to what happens when an abortion is committed. And number two, when people talk about the right to being pro-choice, to say the woman can choose, that's what it means. It means I'm pro-choice. That is for the woman to choose whether the woman wants or whether the woman doesn't want. And people talk about teenagers and how their education can be affected, and how their life or a woman's job and all of that can be affected if they were to go ahead to have a child, even if it isn't convenient for them, either by reason of their age or by reason of their life circumstance at the time. Or sometimes it's just simply because maybe they are not able to take care of a baby, or there's not a man in the life of the baby. And when I hear all of that, at the back of my mind, I'm asking the question, and that question is, why do we talk as if pregnancy is something that happens to women without their knowledge. Why do we talk as if women are victims of pregnancy? You know, like the same way that you can develop a headache, or you can, maybe develop a fever, that kind of thing. Or maybe the same way that um, when the sun is hot, when the sun is out, there's nothing you can do about it. If you live in the tropics, you are going to feel hot. You are going to feel warm because the sun is out, and it's just inevitable. Why? It looks to me like there's a prior argument to be had, or discussion to be had, which is to say, pregnancies are not things that happen to people. They are very specific actions that need to be engaged in order for pregnancy to happen. And so when they act as if you are taking the choice of the woman away, when you deny the woman the right to have abortion on demand, the logic doesn't just sit well with me, because the woman has a choice to have intercourse or not, and nobody has taken that choice away from the woman. But actions do have consequences. Actions do have consequences. So you cannot keep, on the one hand, wanting to engage in an act, and at the same time want to deny the consequences of the act. Pregnancies are not things that, they are not accidents that happen to people. They are specific things that the people do in order to fall pregnant. And so when you talk like this, sometimes you hear issues around what are victims of rape, rape, incest, and those kinds of things. And the truth of the matter is, whatever your posture or position is about women that have become pregnant, or ladies that have become pregnant because they were raped, the point is, it is not germane, it is not a critical issue in the discussion or in the debate, for the simple fact that the category of people seeking to have abortion that fall in the class of those that became pregnant because they were raped is such a minute proportion of those that come looking for abortion that it doesn't really make a difference. So that even if you say, okay, abortion should be allowed, people should have a choice in the case where they became pregnant by reason of abortion, that will still not help 99.9% of the cases, because about that 99% of the cases would not fall in that category. So that the bulk of the pregnancies that are aborted are not for reasons of rape and that kind of thing. Because if rape had happened, then I can even get the argument that you're making, that the woman was denied a choice. There is an action that needs to be performed before you can be pregnant, and that act was not performed by the consent of the woman. So the first consent that this woman is about to give now is whether to keep a baby in her womb or not, since she was not given the chance to have even consented from the start. And so you can at least have a reasonable debate in that regard, in my thinking. But to say that somebody has a boyfriend, or you can live your life however you want, and if you become pregnant, it is your choice to do whatever you want to do with your body. There are two things I have said already that are involved from the conservative standpoint. It is to say, number one, does a baby growing in your womb amount to your body? We believe you have a choice over your body to do what you want to do with your body. But does a baby growing in your womb equate your body? Is the baby the same as your body? Because this baby is likely to, sometimes the baby has a different personality, this baby has a different blood group, so that the blood of the mom and the blood of the baby don't even mix. So how do you go on saying, because you have a right over your body, you can do whatever you like with your body, that now translates to meaning that you can take the life of that baby simply because the baby is taking residence at the moment in your body and deriving nutrition from there. And I said the second argument is to say that the conservative we put forward, and which I very much can relate to, is to say that you do have a right over your body, but the baby is not, shouldn't be considered as your body. But there's even the prior case to be made, which is that you have a right over your body to choose whether to have intercourse or not. And it is that choice that determines whether you fall pregnant or not, because actions do have consequences. Pregnancy is not an act that befall people. It's not just like an accident. Pregnancy is the consequence of an act. And when people start to talk about avoiding consequences, when they do not want to take precaution or to discipline themselves in the act that leads to the consequence, then it's a very logically weak posture to take. But this is one of the major issues, because we are looking at the United States of America, the case study of that country. This is one of the major issues that separates the liberals from the conservatives. And this is why it looks like a lot of Christians, evangelicals, will stand on the side of conservatives. Now, the other thing is that the logic, the reasoning of the conservatives is to say, when somebody has been denied life, nothing else matters. That person cannot have free education. That person cannot have free health. That person cannot have, free housing. Whatever else it is that you want to give to people, so long as you do not uphold the sanctity of human life from conception, to whatever, then all the other rights that you are trying to uphold for people are not as critical. Now, not because those rights are also not seen to be valid by the conservatives, but is to say that there's a procedure, there's a stepwise approach to this thing, that life even has to be protected as sacred before, so that the life can come into being before you start to talk about all of the rights and the privileges that that person can have. So if you are all for anybody just taking the life of any child that is growing up in them at will, and at the same time you want people to have universal health care, universal this and free that and free this, they are saying, if you care that much for people, why don't you care for them in the womb? I know that sometimes the liberals try to make the opposite argument. Now, if you care that much for people in the womb, why don't you care for all of the homeless, all of the poor people, and all of that? And it's a valid charge, but then again, the conservatives will have the answer to give. The basic answer to why are certain people poor, it's answered very differently depending on your political ideology in the United States. If you are a liberal, you are going to put a lot of it on the government. If you are conservative, you are going to put a lot of your justification or reason or explanation or answer to that question. You're going to put a lot of your answer on the people. And even where you put it partly on the people, partly on government, your answer to, so how should that problem be solved, your answer to that question is also going to be very different if you are a liberal than if you were a conservative. So clearly speaking, conservatism and liberalism are two very, very divergent political ideologies in the United States. And one of the things that has come to be a very serious issue, which I think is next week's topic. I don't remember if that's what we are doing next week, is the fact that when people are supportive of a conservative leaning political candidate, how much of that support is supposed to be interpreted to be a support for the full moral character of the candidate who is in favor of the political ideology that the people support. So in the elections or in the situation in the United States, for instance, you would now look at the person of Donald Trump, and then you look at conservatism, all right? Now, so Donald Trump is supportive expressly of conservative ideals, conservative policies, and conservative beliefs, and all of that. And you can now, on the other hand, say, but there's a Donald Trump. And as a person, he's this kind of person, he's that kind of person, and that kind of person, and that kind of person. How should a Christian ever support someone that is like this? You see, when we look at faith and the personal morality of political office holders, we're not going to look at the logical issues that are involved in that kind of argument. But for today, what we have tried to do is looking at the United States is to say that there are two broad ideologies that have become dominant in the United States, and that is that means you're either a liberal or you are conservative. Of course, there are different shades in it. People like Bernie Sanders, for instance, would even be considered a socialist, okay? But because there are two broad categories, as a, you'd be considered socialist, but of course he identifies with the liberals, and then so they are mild, they are extreme liberals, they are so there's a spectrum, but generally, for the sake of comprehension, these are the building blocks, and then you can now have the shades that go either backwards or forward from them. To say that as liberals, they believe generally in the autonomy of the person, like you are your own end. You determine we are all that we have. And so if as a society we can agree on a consensus, then so be it, we run with it. And the conservatives generally believe in the ideals that have been held historically and traditionally in terms of regard for life, and then they believe in the fact that we are not just alone. So the United States of America, I think constitutionally, God is somewhere enshrined somewhere there in their constitution. It's there on their notes. So that very belief in the existence of God has implications and ramifications. And generally, those that are conservative leaning are historically held up to the implications of acknowledging the existence of God, even in the way that political issues are determined and adjudicated upon, so that people don't just determine to do things simply because they can do it. There are other considerations. You don't just determine to do things simply because you can say it does not hurt anybody else. You don't determine to do things simply because you say, well, I'm old enough to be able to make a decision. So being a consenting adult and then not hurting anybody are like the mantras for the liberals to say, does it hurt anybody? Is the person making that decision? Are they old enough? If they are and they are not hurting anybody, why is it anybody's business what somebody does? That kind of thing. And I don't have the time now to go into all of the LGBTQ and the way that divides them ideologically as liberals and as conservatives. But the argument is still basically the same thing, that if they are consenting adults and then they are consenting adults and they are not hurting anybody, it's not your business how people live their lives in private. But you probably know by now that the LGBTQ thing is not just simply about how people live their lives in private, because now it is affecting how people live their lives in public. So somebody is a business person and then a couple comes to him and say, bake us a cake for our wedding and brand it with the gay whatever, and we want you to be at the wedding in order to officiate the cutting of the cake, that kind of thing. And the person says, well, my religious faith, my religious belief will not allow me to do that kind of a thing, and it becomes a legal matter. So very quickly you see that your right to be an adult and then to get married to whomever you want to get married to is no longer a right that is held in a vacuum. You are announcing that is infringing on somebody else's right as an adult to say that my conscience will not allow me to endorse a certain kind of thing, and so I'm not going to be a business provider, a service provider in my business to that kind of thing. And in that very unique or popular case in the US that I'm trying to reference, the interesting thing is that couple that were asking the family bakery shop to make them that cake, that couple have patronized that bakery for quite a while. So these people have actually made cake for them. They've baked, they've rendered services for them over time and in the past. So it wasn't like they were discriminating against them simply because they were gay. All right. But it was that at this point, this is not just about bake us a cake, it is about make our wedding cake for us, and we would want you to be the person, you come to the event and serve the full service. And they said, no, this is no longer just a service you're asking us to render to you. You are also asking us to endorse a form of lifestyle that we do not, and you know that you are our customer. We have baked cake for you, so you can't say that we are discriminating just against you simply because you are gay. So I'm just simply saying that there's a whole lot that quickly starts to go out of hand, even when they say, well, the rule is they are consenting adults, which means that they are adults and they are not forced into it, and then they are not hurting anybody. If you use that same standard, then there's a whole lot that quickly becomes very, very problematic in terms of why we still proscribe them. So I was telling somebody recently, like, what is the argument against polygamy, for instance, in the West? Because in much of the West, polygamy is still proscribed as bigamy. If 5 adults are consenting, all 5 of them want to get married, all 5 of them are happy to live together as in a marriage, and they are not hurting anybody. They are of age and they are all giving their consent. Why shouldn't they get married? Why is incest still proscribed? And you can talk about gay incest. So if a male wants to get married to his male sibling, why should that not be prescribed? Because one of the official or scientific reasons they give for prescribing incest is because of inbreeding. So when people marry from among close relatives, the genetic makeup of their offspring becomes weakened, and then it creates all kinds of problems and health challenges and deformities, congenital conditions. And so from that scientific standpoint, incest is prescribed as being illegal. But if a man gets married to a man who is a sibling, they have no chance whatsoever of giving birth to any children. So should we therefore now allow incest if it is happening in a gay setting? So you see that this whole idea of if they are adults, they are consenting, and they are not hurting anybody, if that is the standard you want to use, there is a whole lot of things in the West that currently are not allowed that you will not know how to disallow them. So, but this is what happens when there's nothing else in the frame, in your ideological framework, outside of the human person, all right? Because if God does not exist, then everything is permissible. I think somebody has, that has been well observed over time, that if God does not exist, everything is permissible. So the point is that whether conservatives believe in the existence of God or not, the idea is that conservative ideas and policies, they are very close to a lot of Christian ideals. This is why you see that generally a lot of evangelicals in the United States of America are naturally more inclined to being conservatives than they're inclined to be liberals. People have asked the question, can a Christian not be either a liberal or a conservative if they choose? Well, and people have answered that question differently. Some people have said, no, you can't be a genuine Christian and be a liberal, for instance. Other people have said, no, it doesn't matter because both conservatives and liberals, they are not perfect. The ideologies are not perfect. So it's 2 imperfect ideologies, and you can reasonably be on either side. Personally, given the way that the ideologies have been harped out and have been fleshed out of late, I personally believe that it is very difficult, in all honesty, in all good conscience, to be an enthusiastic supporter of the liberal movement, of the Liberal Party in the United States. I even believe that it is very difficult, if not impossible, to be a reluctant supporter of the liberal movement or ideology as it currently stands in the United States and elsewhere around the world. So I hope that we've been able to give you a little bit of what I was intending to do today, which is to look at faith and political ideology using the case study of the United States of America. Thank you very, very much. I don't know if there are any questions coming out of. Are there any questions? Please check if there's any question there before we close. All right. It doesn't seem like we have any questions. What about MixLR? All right. Okay, I'm trying to check. I'm trying to check. Okay. I think that we don't have any questions. All right. I haven't seen any questions, so I think at this point we can call it an evening. And just as we close, I want to say to you again that political ideologies are very difficult to define, but they are very much like paradigms, they are very much like worldviews. And there's a reason why conservatives are the people that a lot of evangelicals seems to identify more with. By next week, or when we look at the personal morality of political leaders and faith, we'll talk more about the difference between the personal morality of the political office holder and policy. Because in dealing with politics, you need to be able to sometimes, even as painful as it might be, you, because we live in an imperfect world, you are probably going to be occasionally forced to have to make a choice between policy and personality. And then in deciding policy, political ideology comes into play to say, okay, as a system, as a political system, what are the values that are upheld and what are the policies that are pursued? And then what is the personal character of the people that are now working to implement these policies? So that because sometimes a support for policy can easily be misunderstood to be a support for the personal life and morality of the political office holder. So hold that distinction in mind, and then when we come to looking at faith and the personal morality, politics and the personal morality of political office holders, then we'll now look into those ideological issues that have to do with the differences between policies and their personal morality. But I think that there's a question. All right.
What should we do as Christians outside USA in supporting the conservative?
All right. Somebody's asking, what should we do as Christians outside the USA in supporting the conservatives? Well, as Christians, if you're a Christian, the bottom line would be prayer. There is no barrier, there's no limitation to praying. And so at least that's one thing that everybody can do from wherever they are around the world. You can pray for conservatives in the US and elsewhere around the world. And I also think that as Christians, it is important to also probably study how some of these systems work and how they've been established, and to see how there can be something of an evolution of the political practice, particularly in Africa, so that ideology can start to come to the center of our political engagement in Africa. It's so difficult to find very clear political ideologies that define political parties on the African continent. So even though I'm Nigerian and all that, it's the easiest thing is to go to places like the United States of America in order to bring these kinds of picture. Because here in this part of the world, political ideology simply almost means nothing. They are generally, most of our parties are generally just same of the same. That's why it's very easy for people to cross carpet, to crisscross, okay? Somebody gets into office on the platform of a party, and then 6 months down the line, he's already decamped and gone to the other party. That's simply because there are no binding, there are no clear-cut political ideologies that are matters of, if you like, worldviews. They are matters of paradigms, such that you can say as a system, there's just no way I could be a liberal, or there's no way I could be a socialist, or there's no way I could be a Marxist. So as Christians, who live outside of the United States of America, maybe something else that we can do is not for America now, but is to see that we also labor in our own context and in our countries to see that ideology becomes an integral or an important part of our political experience and our political experiments on the continent. And one of the ways that that would happen is when Christians actually start to also get engaged in political discussions and eventually participation in the political process, especially at the formative level, in order to give shape and to give form to and to give an outlook to the political parties that are formed here, so that ideology can start to become quite a mainstream factor in the evolution of our political systems. Thank you very much. All right. With that, I think we come to the end of today's class. And again, I want to apologize for the late start and then the issues we had with the audios. But we thank God that at least we have been able to manage to echo out something from today's topic. So I'll see you again next week, Monday. And please try to share the link. Some persons came in and probably left because we hadn't started. So let people know that the class still held despite those initial challenges. Thank you very much, and God bless.